Hello and welcome to What Would Jane Do?
And we're actually recording this on a very special day. We're recording it on Jane Austen's birthday because
Happy birthday, Jane.
Yes, happy birthday, Jane. Because she shares with Jesus having her birthday in December. And we thought in honor of both Christmas and her birthday, we would tackle
that tricky subject, what would Jane do about presents?
And so joining me today is, as ever, Kate McFarlane. So, Kate, we were just talking before we started recording about how cold we both were.
Yes.
What are your Christmas plans looking like at the moment?
Staying warm mainly. For those that are watching this podcast, I have several cats that tend to like cuddling up to me in cold weather anyway, so I put an extra cat on. But in Regency times, what you definitely would have done, and I have been saying to my husband this week, I am so in sympathy with people from the olden days who did not have the luxury of central heating. And you see in period dramas, people are wearing coats, shawls, all sorts of things indoors for good reason, because you might have had, if you were very lucky, had a roaring fire, or you might have been like poor Fanny Price stuck in an attic with no fire. And the obvious thing to do is to put on more layers. So viewers and listeners, I am wearing a sort of chemise.
Here.
I'm wearing I'm like an archaeological dig. I've got a small chemise. Then I've got a green cotton fichu. And then I've got, I wish you could see it in its full glory, but I've got this most beautifully knitted from, I dare say, the Jane Austen knitting pattern, which is based on, I think, knitting patterns of the period, but it's the most beautiful cherry red shawl, which out of lovely wool. And then on top of that, I've got a very light wool India pattern, sort of paisley pattern shawl. So I'm very snug. And of course, I'm wearing headgear. I'm wearing my cotton cap on the top of my head, because what fool would go around with their head uncovered in cold weather? It's the recipe for disaster. Taken off by some cataclysmic flu or something like that.
Yes, I was thinking this week. I was thinking about the old tradition that would have been around when Jane went to church, which is women keep their head covered and men take their hats off. On the whole, and I actually thought, you know what, the women were
onto a good thing,
because I was sitting there with my woolly hat. I don't want to take my hat off. Anyway,
well, you can see why people wore headgear to go to bed. You'd have sleeping caps, and very good idea too, especially if you're in a big drafty room, and definitely a good idea to have bed curtains like Scrooge.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually thinking about presents and of course clothing, but I just want to point out today, I've spotted the Christmas present I want, but
really?
My husband was too late. I just pointed out it's just been sold at auction in Winchester.
I think I know where this is going.
Yes, here it comes. I thought I quite fancied that. It was first edition of Jane Austen's novels that went of 181,000. So a snap.
Do we know? Has it gone to a private buyer or perhaps a museum?
I don't know. History does record in today. I got the impression it was a private buyer, but I could be wrong. The article about this was on the BBC website, so it will be out if you want to check where they've gone. Somebody is getting that under the Christmas tree, and it's not me, unless my husband has ruined us
with his extravagance.
Anyway, so first of all, let's what Christmas was like in the Georgian. I mean, first of all, just to say, we joke about Christmas starting as soon as Thanksgiving in America is over, the sort of mid-November onwards. That was not the Georgian experience. Here comes a warm cat. I've just spotted it.
This is, sorry viewers, this is my cat Nix, who is, as you can see, black as a lump of coal and very naughty. So that's very appropriate for Christmas.
Yes.
And she's always getting in on the act. So I've got 3 cats, and they're all named after Roman goddesses, which is very Regency, I'm sure. So this is Nyx, goddess of the night, because she's so dark. I've got Eos, and I've got Artemis, who is coincidentally a very good huntress.
That puts in mind that we should definitely do a Jane Austen cat or dog podcast. But we'll leave that.
Yes.
So going back to the Georgian.
Their Christmas period ran from about December the 6th to January the 6th. This is following the church year.
Yes, it was very much governed by the church, and the 12 days of Christmas and all that.
So it starts with St. Nicholas' Day and ends with the Magi, the Day of the Magi.
Yes.
And another thing, just to sort of orientate you, if you've been watching Jane Austen adaptations, you'll be aware of the idea of there being a season where people go out to balls and what have you. Christmas was definitely a time when everyone returned back.
Country homes, if they had them, and socialising much more in their local place.
Private parties are far better than public balls, Julia, as you know.
Absolutely.
And a Christmas party, well. A party is a party, I say, but a Christmas party, as Mr. Elton would say.
Yeah, so I think the emphasis on having a party with people you knew rather than going out into a society of people who were more
and also, if you think about it, you would probably travel to the nearest people you knew, because if you think of poor Mr. Woodhouse worrying terribly about the snow, and you think in these days, well, he was a hypochondriac, let's face it, and the first flake and he was terrified, but it was definitely something to be worried about, the weather, because the roads might become actually impassable or very, very dangerous to travel on. So you would probably only go and visit your nearest neighbours, and you wouldn't make any plans to go very far afield at the Christmas time, because the weather would probably be so terrible and very, very cold as well.
Yeah,
and there are accounts of people freezing to death on top of coaches, aren't there, in bad weather, if you were lucky enough to be an outside traveller. It could be bitterly cold.
Yeah, absolutely. And
we're having a particularly cold snap in the UK.
And it just reminds, this was weather which was familiar to Jane, because they lived in a cold microclimate.
Very cold, yes. Didn't they have at some point when that volcano, I think it was some point where there was a volcano that all the ash basically affected the weather. So you had a year
around
of
1815, 1816, isn't it? Yeah.
And of course, she was alive for the last frost fair, which is 1814, and the Thames froze over completely. That shows how cold it was. So it makes you think again when singing all the carols about in the bleak midwinter. But now, moving to her novels, you don't get an awful lot about Christmas.
But you do get a little bit. And so, for example, the Bennets entertain family, Christmas.
And the Western Christmas party.
In Mansfield Park, they throw a ball for William and Fanny.
So you get the idea that it is a sort of social time.
Yes, very much.
What about tradition? What kind of Georgian traditions are you aware of?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people would think they might have a Christmas tree, and they, as you say, I think it was Princess Charlotte or Queen Charlotte brought in Germanic Christmas tree traditions, but it hadn't really caught on yet, not until Queen Victoria.
This is the thing. I want people to be able to go to their pub quiz and actually say, aha. If you Google who introduced the Christmas tree, it was Prince Albert and Queen
Victoria and Albert.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, what happened was Queen Charlotte, who was German as well, in 1800 introduced a Christmas tree as like a table decoration, and it caught on in court circles. So it's like a high class thing to do.
Time to trickle down, didn't it? I mean, people were bringing in evergreens from pagan times, really, weren't they? And it's a really good idea. You bring a bit of greenery, a bit of life into your house at the darkest, deadest time of the year, in the hopes that spring is on its way. And we're about 1 week away from the solstice now. So people bringing light and getting together and celebrating while it's a downtime. You can't go out and harvest or do much of anything really when it's so dark. So you may as well just kick back and enjoy hopefully all the food you've saved in the good times and make the most of it and celebrate and hope for a better new year.
decorations were free because they just went out and got the ivy and the holly and the things and the yew, things which were freely available. Another tradition that was still going in Georgian times,
Yule log.
it's not the chocolate sort which we have.
Sadly.
This was a real big branch which was selected, and the idea is it's supposed to last a long time. It was a sort of symbol of warmth at home and good luck, and practical.
Very practical, yes. I know we've been supplementing our heating with wood lately, and it just makes you feel so much warmth just looking at it, never mind actually feeling the warmth from it. It's a very comforting thing, and it's basically a very basic human thing to gather around a fire and tell stories and gather around the warmth together. So it's a very natural celebratory sort of thing to have.
Yes. And they did, of course, we're now getting there, they did give presents. Another thing which is much disputed is the origin of the word Boxing Day. In the UK, it's called Boxing Day.
Yeah.
And there's two front runners out there.
There always are.
One is because it's a day of sport, so people box. The other is that they give presents to servants, including like leftovers from the feast the day before. So they would send servants would work, and then they would go home on Boxing Day to their own families, and I suppose have a feast at home, a little meal at home.
Yeah, it makes sense. You have Christmas Day for you and the family, and then the day after, perhaps even when you've got some scraps to hand out to people, you look after your tenants, or you look after your neighbours, or are charitable towards the local poor, and you either give them some money. Some people gave them perhaps secondhand clothes, but certainly things to brighten the days. It's neighbourly, isn't it, to be charitable and to look after your neighbours. And sometimes it went the other way around as well, and tenants would gift small things to their landlord to keep in with them, quite possibly, and to remind them that they were good tenants.
Yeah, so definitely presents were part of the what happened at the Christmas period, but there wasn't open it on Christmas morning. It would have been something you would exchange over that period, and there wouldn't be a huge stack of really presents as we tend to do now. It would be largely, majority of people would be receiving things they needed. Like
and it was very personal gift giving. Yeah, so you wouldn't be giving to all and sundry. And in fact, it was very bad etiquette for an unmarried man to give a present to a woman he wasn't affianced to. So you just wouldn't give it to not immediate family. It was probably seen as a faux pas if you were giving very extravagant presents to people you weren't related to.
So, thinking about the real Jane, I went and had a look through her letters to find what references I could to Christmas, and there are two that
what did you come up with?
The two that came out. One is a joke. I mean, of course it's a joke. It's Jane writing. To Cassandra, so in 1798. So she's obviously away from home, which must have annoyed her over Christmas. And she talks about all the dancing at the balls and how
Black Cap
was much admired and all sorts of things. And it goes,
I wish you a Merry Christmas, but no compliments of the season. So she's writing to her sister, and I'm sure there was some kind of family joke going around about wishing no compliments, because of course she gives that line to Lady Catherine de Bourgh
later on.
Yes, which is marvellous.
A little bit of what might have gone on a Christmas meal is that she reviews the food.
So writing in 1808, 10 years later, the widgeon and the preserved ginger were as delicious as one could wish. But as to our black butter, do not decoy anybody to Southampton by such a lure, for it is all gone.
I thought, well, what is butter? It sounds really...
Is it butter with brown sugar in?
No, I've looked it up.
I'm trying to think. I read
apparently
somewhere about the recipe for black butter, and it didn't
Yeah.
sound that bad, actually.
it's actually sort of like a
Caramelized apple
There
sauce.
you go. Yes, it's
Oh,
apple
quite nice.
butter. Yes,
Mm.
by any other name.
Yeah.
Which is
so
delicious.
black butter. So that's what they were eating. Widgeon thing and black butter, but it's all gone. So don't go round to their house. They've eaten it.
Oh,
And then turning to the novels, I thought we would sort of laser focus
On the role of presents.
yes,
role
I was
of
having a
present
think today, actually, how many gifts play a role in Jane Austen's novels, and you probably, I'm sure, come up with several. One I
I've got
immediately
two.
thought of was you've got two, have you? Okay, I've got
Yeah.
obviously the pianos play quite a gift role. We've got Jane Fairfax, of course, is given the gift, a mysterious piano, which there is much speculation around who the gift giver could be, and she's sort of staying very quiet about it. But it actually causes her a lot of difficulty because there's just endless speculation that it could be a lover. And of course, she doesn't want that sort of notoriety in the village, and is probably quite a bit embarrassed about that. But you also have Marianne Dashwood with the gift of a very neat little pianoforte from Colonel Brandon on her recovery, and some sheet music, which I'm sure Jane Austen herself would have appreciated. And I thought, yes, that's a contrast, isn't it?
So stopping you there, do you think actually, aside from the significance of it, that Jane is actually writing into the book what she really wants herself? Is that
quite
thing
possibly? Yeah, well, you have that, don't you, as a trope of, or a beautiful gift, a thoughtful gift from an admirer, and if you're going to go all out from a rich admirer, then a beautiful piano would certainly be a very extravagant gift. But it's very interesting, again, because we were talking on a previous podcast, weren't we, about what are heroes, and one of the things we said that Jane Austen emphasizes in her good heroes is being thoughtful, being kind and thoughtful. And Colonel Brandon is very thoughtful with Marianne's pianoforte because it's small enough to fit in a small cottage, whereas Willoughby initially gives her a thoughtful present, which is his pocketbook of sonnets, which Marianne is very enamored by, but then unfortunately ruins that by giving her the gift of a horse. And of course, it's a very unthoughtful gift because she's got nowhere to stable it, nobody to look after it, and she has to feed it, and it's going to be eating its head off. And horses, as anyone knows, are incredibly expensive to keep. So it's a very ostentatious gift. It's wildly inappropriate because he's not at that point, or ever indeed, a fiance, and so it's not really related to the family at all. And it's just very unthoughtful because, as Eleanor says, we can't possibly accept this. It's way too extravagant and expensive and just impossible. So he causes a ruckus and he says, "Oh well, I'll keep it then for you."
Yeah.
Put it aside on the shelf for you.
The piano thing, the skipping between the two novels with Frank Churchill and Colonel Brandon. And so Colonel Brandon gives it to the family, kind of. It's everyone knows Marianne's going to play it. And Marianne by that stage is being more discreet, so she's sort of saying, "Oh no, it's for all of us," kind of thing.
It's for everybody. It's for everybody. You to just everybody.
Yeah. Whereas Frank Churchill leaves Jane Fairfax with just embarrassment. And the story very much, that piano emphasizes that he is trying, he's happy with the intrigue and she's not. So here's the
I mean, it's very embarrassing. She's unmarried. She's living with her aunts in a very small place. So and then this extravagant present comes out of nowhere and causes a lot of speculation in her small society. And Frank Churchill's loving the mystery, as you say, but it's actually very embarrassing for poor Jane.
Yeah, and it's for him.
He talks about himself. He's selfish, isn't he? He's very selfish in that respect. And having both agreed to keep their relationship secret, he then goes and blows it out of the water, all guns firing, by basically giving her a very extravagant present and causing all this speculation. So he's not being very secretive at all.
Oh, so I think really what is presence in the novels when they're mentioned as the key to a character.
Yes, very much
So both the way someone gives a present and what it is yet
Yes.
another light on there.
Well, you can definitely see that with poor Fanny Price.
Yes, that's my other
She
one.
gets a lovely necklace from her brother, and then a more extravagant necklace from Mary Crawford, ostensibly, you know, oh, you were about to be my sister. And then she's very embarrassed by, again, a very ostentatious gift. Now, I'm not sure if this is in the book or if it's just in the Mansfield Park film. But I think Henry Crawford sends a gift of birds and a very ostentatious display of a bird and somebody playing music and flowers and all the rest of it. And it's very much putting her under an obligation to say yes to him. So it's, again, a present that causes as much upset as pleasure. I'm sure it's a little of both involved, but it's very much, you know, you will marry me because I can give you all of this, all these extravagant gifts,
So
rather than just letting her make it.
That thing with the necklace, I think William gives her the pendant, and then she needs something to hang it on, and Mary gives her the chain, which is actually from Henry.
Ah.
So I think this is how it goes. I'll be drummed out.
We'll have to reread this.
Doesn't Edward give her a plain one? And says,
yeah,
no,
so she's got a plain one.
You must wear the one Mary gave because he's still. So
that's
basically,
right. Yes, so she gets two chains at the same time.
Yeah, that exchange symbolizes the manipulation of the brother and sister, and again it causes embarrassment for Fanny, and the fact that, you know, she prefers the plain, which suitor will she eventually, you know, go with? Of course, we know. So again, it's all encoded in there. I'll have to go back and reread that section back like that. That's the basic outline of it. A gift that causes embarrassment.
Yes.
And it's inappropriate.
The underlying theme there is it's not thoughtful. It's not given with the pleasure of the recipient in mind. It's for show and display of the giver, and definitely usually some wanting the recipient to be beholden to them in some way.
Yes, very much. So I think presents are in Jane Austen are like little bombs. They go off in the plot, and you see if they run for cover or if they are hit by the blast. It's got that feel deliberately there to. So if you are reading a Jane Austen novel and you come across a present, stop and have a think about what this present is saying.
Well, doesn't Mr. Elton make a present of the frame he goes to get for Emma's portrait? I'm not sure whether somebody pays for it or he volunteers to pay for it. He certainly volunteers to go fetch it and get it framed. And again, it's putting Emma under obligation for him as a suitor. Look at this beautiful frame I have given for your beautiful picture. Aren't I wonderful? Aren't I your hero riding off to get this framed?
And that exchange, of course, is another thing, is the misunderstanding of what the present means.
Yes, exactly.
He's drawing it thinking, I'm drawing this for Emma. Thinking he is drawing my friend because he loves my friend.
Harriet. Yes.
So again, that's another thing where a little bomb of a present, it's not exactly a present, it's more of a gift in that sense. He's using in that it's a strange, like she's sort of making him give it. It's one of those bizarre things. So
triangle of misunderstanding, Julia.
Absolutely, which is basically the plot. If you wanted to do a picture of just fill it with triangles, because there's lots. I mean, that's a very good description of the plot.
I couldn't find any, or I couldn't think immediately of any gifts in Pride and Prejudice. Can you? I couldn't think off the top of my head. Wickham certainly doesn't give anyone gifts because he's deep in debt.
No,
nothing springs to mind.
No, I mean there are generous things like being invited to go on holiday. You know, those things giving
Yes.
experience, which of course is this year's trend, is giving experience, not physical things. So you could say that Elizabeth's aunt and uncle are giving her the gift of it.
Yes, a holiday would be a wonderful gift for anybody. Oh, and I thought of course, it's a very minor thing, but not for Anne. In Persuasion, of course, Captain Wentworth gifts her his umbrella in Bath when it's raining and says, "Here, take this."
Or does he
Obviously
lend
makes
it?
a present of it. Or does he lend it?
He doesn't get to give it her at all, does he? Yeah. So yes, I think that there is, when you find the gifts, there aren't huge numbers of them, but they're there, but a much lower key event.
Yes.
So the kind of hallmark film, Jane Austen's mental landscape, you know, her Christmas sort of comes and goes in a much lower key.
And indeed, I think the message that a lot of people are saying these days in our straitened times is we've kind of moved too far away from the true meaning of Christmas, which is, you know, spending time with your loved ones, thinking of others, and it's all become so commercialized, and we've actually put people under enormous pressure to give too many gifts, and they're actually saying, no, scale it back, just give thoughtful gifts, give little things, don't overwhelm people. And I've been guilty of it myself on occasion. I love giving gifts. It makes me feel great to give gifts to other people, but then they are sometimes a bit embarrassed because either they haven't got me something and I've got them something, or I've given them so many gifts they think, well, I've only got you this. And you have to sort of scale it back and think, yes, you may love giving gifts yourself, but you can again put somebody in a tight spot by doing so. So you have to rein it in, I think, on occasion. There is such a thing as too many gifts. And I see children as well, when they're given hundreds of presents, they value them less.
Yeah,
and just, you know, throw things on the ground or just leave them if they've got so many that it doesn't really matter.
Absolutely. And I was sort of asking myself, what would Jane do about think that she would mock? There would be a character in one of her, if she was writing today, a character who completely misjudges the Christmas presents, and the person who makes it a burden, that you know, the one-upmanship. That's why a lot of families amongst the adults, I mean, that's in our family, we all decide we don't get each other presents, because getting to see each other is the present.
Yes, absolutely, and spending time. And I think there was a famous philosopher who turned up unannounced, usually on somebody's doorstep, and said, "I'm giving you the gift of myself." And he would just go in to their household. He would do family accounts. I think he was a mathematician, and he would just make himself useful about the place.
Well, that reminds me of I got adult children. My daughter was asking me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said, actually, I'd really like you to sort out the attic. You know, things. So
yes, which is a great present.
My love language is action. You know, someone doing something for me, taking a horrible task back.
But going out on a limb here, Jane Austen,
she might be similar. Also, as a pious woman, she would definitely regard the church celebrations as her main thing, enjoying singing the carols.
Yeah.
I was looking to see if what carols they would have sung, and it's interesting that a lot of the world and all that were there, but they would have sung them to different tunes. Because a lot of the tunes we sing now are foreign.
There's a famous folk singer in my area of Yorkshire called Kate Rusby, and she's collected all these different folk tunes, especially ones you sing at Christmas, and she does a wonderful Christmas show, and she's basically collected them from going around the pubs. And in different valleys, you often have different tunes, and you would have had the community who all knew this particular tune, and then perhaps in another valley you would have had quite a different one. So it's quite interesting how what we think of as traditional carols are just the most popular tunes of their day.
Yeah, absolutely. So but I definitely think she'd have loved the parties.
Oh yes, well no, she definitely loved assemblies and wrote a lot about it in her letters, you know, how much fun she had. So she wasn't a stick in the mud, and she certainly didn't despise people going out and having some fun.
But I can imagine her, if she was in the room with us when everyone's opening their presents, she would be suspicious of the motive behind the presents. That would be, you know.
Well,
I can
as
feel
an
her-
author, she's probably looking for the hidden meanings behind gifts.
Yeah.
Oh, you're giving me a beauty set. Does that mean you think I'm ugly? What?
The traps. So that was fun. So Jane Austen in presents, what would she do? Not bankrupt her presents, but probably think
Definitely.
up something meaningful, and maybe that she made herself. So
Well, I was actually looking, believe it or not, I was thinking there is so much Jane Austen merchandise out there. And
okay.
of course, what do you give the Jane Austen fanatic is more merchandise. And I thought, okay, I'll just have a look and see the weirdest Jane Austen present I can find.
Okay.
And I was quite pleased to see there weren't that many weird ones as such. Lots of presents themed around tea, books, clothing, obviously.
Okay, that sounds nice.
Yes, it was all lovely stuff. So I'm glad to see most of it was fairly tasteful. There was Pride and Prejudice cookie cutters, which are silhouettes of Lizzie and Darcy. So that would be quite fun. Stickers, candles, tea cozies, tea, clothing, jewelry, books, material prints, wax seals you can get. The weirdest one I found was a Chatsworth floor plan. Because obviously Chatsworth is supposed to be one of the representations of Pemberley, presumably, but it was a bit obscure. Yeah. And you'll be delighted to know and tell your husband that there is a Pride and Prejudice third edition, so not quite as good as the first one, on sale for £25,750, a snip. But obviously third place isn't maybe as good for you as first place.
I mean, I'm hanging out. I'm waiting for the first edition to come back on the market, obviously. Yes, so, Kate, we haven't done this for a while, but I thought we would end 2022 with one of our little segments that we used to do, which was
naming a Darcy and a Wickham of the week.
It could be an Elizabeth and a Lady Catherine. I leave it up to you.
Whoever we can ascribe to this character.
Yeah. So do you have a Darcy of the week? Be a thing
as well, Julia, because I've got one that isn't a person. Well, I've got a Mr. Wickham of the week, which is apparently Sam Bankman-Fried. Great name, and probably what was going to happen to him. The former boss of the bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange FTX, who was arrested in the Bahamas. The US had earlier filed charges against the 30-year-old. So, you know, the bubble has burst. The South Seas bubble has burst on this cryptocurrency. And it was a good week for our Mr. Darcy, who is called Dave, a stray cat from Doha, who is coming home, even if football isn't. The Moggy was adopted as an unofficial mascot by the England squad, and players promised to bring him back to the UK if they won the trophy. Now, spoiler, folks, they didn't win, but 2 hours after the team left their hotel for the airport, Dave was photographed en route to a vet to start his 4 months quarantine.
Excellent. I'm very pleased that Dave has escaped. Though it sounds like the team, in a sense, the rescuer is the team, and Dave is Lydia. I do think your
footballers are the new officers.
Yeah, I do think your pick for Mr. Wickham is very, very, very good. I find it Freed. Is that he looks as though he's kind of like a kid who's wandered into the wrong business. He looks innocent, but maybe, but we know
that nobody notices. Yes.
Not to trust appearances. So be warned. I never understood digital currency, so he hasn't.
And you were quite right to understand it as well.
Yeah.
And
yes.
who have you?
No, I think they're very good. I would say that my Mr. Darcy of the week, all the people working to keep things moving
during the cold snap. The pipes in our village froze.
Water companies get a lot of bad press at the moment, but
but they're always working. I know.
Reconnecting the water. So well done, all the emergency workers.
My pick for Mr. Wickham is actually worse than anything Mr. Wickham did, and that's the ongoing war in the Ukraine. It's great sadness that we're at our first Christmas since that war broke out. So I nominate the people who are pursuing that war in Russia as my Mr. Wickham, and I hope they turn it around and sue for peace.
Yeah, so that's it's worse than Wickham. Much
Well,
worse.
to cheer us up, I have got some good going on in the world, and it actually makes me happy because it's kind of returning to an olden time tradition.
Okay, let's cheer us up.
So a baker in Guisborough, so it's about population of about 17,000, is reviving an ancient tradition to help his neighbours endure high energy costs. So thousands of years ago, societies built one oven in town where everybody went to bake their bread. And now Ed Hamilton Truitt from Brickyard Bakery is offering to bake Christmas cakes for anyone worried about the energy costs of turning on the oven for several hours. He's saying at this time of year, there can be no greater expression of love than baking the family Christmas cake, but that is being lost because of the prohibitive energy costs of running the oven for a few hours. He's also offering to pay what you want cooking classes, which he describes as a tremendous success, with lots of folk enjoying learning how to cook some cost-effective, tasty meals and some free hot tea or coffee to boot. So well done him.
Well, yes, so absolutely. Let's end with that wonderful Mr. Darcy there.
Oh, no. I've got something even better to end with, Julia.
Oh, okay. It feels like Scrooge waking up on Christmas Day.
The gifts keep coming. Yeah. No, this is a gift advertisement, which I was very tickled by. And I will read it out to you. It's from Ackermans, a little bit later than Christmas, February 1814, but the gifts were still around the corner. So it says, this is an advertisement. See if this is a gift you would like for your loved ones. So it says, New Year's gifts are tokens of friendship which every absent child feels anxious to receive from their indulgent parents. During this inclement but auspicious season, what could be more acceptable than a pair of Marstons, patent stays or corsets, which are admirably calculated to improve the shape and the comfort and support the weak and debilitated, and which are selling at the old prices, notwithstanding the exorbitant charge for materials, warranted to be manufactured by the first hands in the business, and in the most elegant and fashionable style, full 25% under the regular trade price. Genteel rooms for ladies to try on. Country orders executed with integrity and dispatch. Number 25, Holywell Street, The Strand. And I've added regular T's and C's apply. What could be better for your debilitated parents than a corset, Julia? See, all your gift giving is solved.
Yes, made by the best hands.
The first hands, Julia.
Oh,
first hands in business.
Well, on that,
that's a lovely description, isn't it? And it's a lovely use of language, which of course the Regency crowd, that's the snappy advertising of its day.
Basically, he was saying 25% off prices held to last year's 18.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, Kate, I wish you and all our listeners a very Merry Christmas. And
indeed, God bless everyone.
And before we go, is there any Jane Austen balls or news that you've got lined up?
Well, the balls are still happening, and I think the Jane Austen dancers in Bath are having a lovely time. I was looking at some books I might recommend for Christmas presents for people, and one of them is Jane and the 12 Days of Christmas, a Christmas mystery by Stephanie Barron. There's Jane Austen's Christmas, the Festive Season in Georgian England by Maria Hubert. And finally, a Jane Austen Christmas, Regency Christmas Traditions by Maria Grace. So any one of those, I'd be happy to find under my tree on Christmas morning.
Okay, noted. I also saw that Number 1 Royal Crescent has dressed up the house for a Georgian Christmas as well.
Oh, lovely.
If you happen
definitely worth a visit.
Yeah, if you happen to be in Bath, that's a good place. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And we look forward to seeing everybody in
2023.
Goodbye.
Okay. Have a lovely Christmas, everybody, and a Happy New Year. Bye-bye.